The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension. Everyone's eyes were on the man standing at the defense table, his hands clenched into fists. Officers flanked him on both sides, their faces stone cold. The prosecutor, a confident-looking man in his 40s, paced in front of the jury. "Your Honor, this man," he said, pointing a dramatic finger at the accused, "is guilty of armed robbery. He was caught near the scene of the crime, and we have eyewitnesses who saw him fleeing. He had the stolen money in his car." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The accused stood still, his face unreadable. The judge, an older man with glasses perched on his nose, turned to the defendant. "Sir, do you have anything to say for yourself?" The man finally spoke. His voice was calm, but firm. "Your Honor, I am innocent." The prosecutor scoffed. "Innocent? Then why were you found near the crime scene? Why was the stolen money in your car?" The accused turned his eyes to the jury, then to the officers, and finally, back to the prosecutor. He took a deep breath and then said something that made the entire courtroom go silent. "Because I am the state's chief prosecutor." The entire courtroom froze. The jury members exchanged bewildered glances. The officers standing beside him stiffened. The judge's grip on his gavel tightened. The prosecutor, the very man accusing him, suddenly went pale. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. No one moved. No one breathed. And then, 2 days earlier, Jacob Harris had been sitting in his office, sipping coffee and going over his case files. His office was lined with bookshelves filled with law books, court rulings, and past case notes. A framed photo of his late father sat on his desk. His father had been a lawyer too, one who taught him that justice wasn't just about winning. It was about doing the right thing. His assistant, Lisa, knocked on the door and poked her head in. "Sir, you have an appointment with the Attorney General at noon. He wants an update on the Martin case." Jacob nodded, placing his coffee down. "All right, I'll be ready." Lisa hesitated. "Also, there's been another armed robbery last night. The police are handling it, but something seems off." Jacob frowned. "What do you mean?" "They caught a suspect nearby, but something doesn't add up. He was found unconscious in his car, and the stolen money was just sitting there in the passenger seat. It's almost too easy." Jacob leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "That does sound strange. Get me the case file." Lisa nodded and left. Jacob stared out of his window, watching the busy streets of the city below. He had handled hundreds of cases in his career, but something about this one didn't sit right. That night, Jacob decided to go down to the precinct himself. He knew the officers on duty, and they knew him. When he walked in, they greeted him with nods and half-smiles. But one officer, Detective Roger Mills, seemed uneasy. "Detective," Jacob said, shaking his hand. "Tell me about this case." Mills sighed. "It's an open-and-shut case, Mr. Harris. The guy was found near the scene, knocked out cold. When he woke up, he had no memory of what happened. And the money? It was in his car. We also have 2 witnesses who claim they saw him running from the store." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Too neat." Mills nodded reluctantly. "Exactly. But my hands are tied. Orders from the top. The case is being processed, and he's already been assigned a public defender." Jacob narrowed his eyes. He knew how the system worked. Sometimes, the people who were supposed to uphold justice rushed things, eager to close a case and move on. But what if this man was innocent? "Let me talk to him," Jacob said. Mills hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but just a few minutes." Jacob walked into the holding cell area, where a man sat on a metal bench, rubbing his temples. His face was bruised. He looked up as Jacob entered. "Who are you?" the man asked. "Jacob Harris," Jacob said. "I'm the state's chief prosecutor." The man's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Then why are you here?" "Because something about this case doesn't feel right." "Tell me what happened." The man sighed. "I don't know. One minute, I was driving home from work, and the next, I woke up with a headache in a jail cell. They say I robbed a store, but I swear I didn't." Jacob studied him closely. The fear in his eyes was real. The confusion in his voice wasn't an act. Something was very wrong. But before Jacob could ask more questions, an officer rushed into the room, face pale. "Sir, you need to come with me." "Now." Jacob stood up. What's wrong? The officer swallowed hard. You're under arrest. Jacob froze. What? Another officer stepped in, already pulling out handcuffs. Jacob Harris, you're under arrest for armed robbery. Jacob felt his breath leave his body. What are you talking about? He demanded. The officer's grip tightened. We found stolen money in your car. You match the suspect's description. You have the right to remain silent. Jacob's mind raced. This had to be a mistake. He was the chief prosecutor. This didn't make any sense. But the officers didn't hesitate. They grabbed his arms and locked the cuffs around his wrists. As they led him out of the precinct, every officer he had worked with for years stared at him. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. He wanted to scream that they had the wrong guy, that this was insane. Instead, he kept walking. And that's how, just 2 days later, he found himself in a courtroom, being accused of a crime he didn't commit. And no one, not the judge, not the jury, not even the man prosecuting him, knew that the criminal standing before them was the very man who ran the state's justice system. And the worst part? Jacob had no idea who had set him up. A heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Jacob Harris, the state's chief prosecutor, stood at the defense table, handcuffed, accused of a crime he had never committed. He had just revealed his true identity to the court, and the shock on the prosecutor's face was undeniable. The officers beside him stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. The jury members leaned forward, whispering among themselves. But before anyone could react, the judge slammed his gavel. Order in the court. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. He adjusted his glasses and looked straight at Jacob. What did you just say? Jacob's jaw tightened. I said, I am the state's chief prosecutor. Gasps rippled through the courtroom again. The prosecutor, a man named Alan Brooks, blinked rapidly, his confidence shaken for the first time since the trial began. He glanced down at his papers, flipping through them as if trying to find an explanation. The officers gripping Jacob's arms loosened their hold slightly, uncertainty creeping into their faces. Jacob took a deep breath. I have been framed. His voice was calm but firm. And I will prove it. A thick, unbearable silence followed. The judge frowned, his grip on his gavel tightening. This is a serious claim, Mr. Harris. But before Jacob could respond, the courtroom doors suddenly burst open. A uniformed officer rushed in, breathless, carrying a file. He hurried toward the prosecution's table and whispered something in Alan Brooks' ear. Whatever it was, it made Brooks' face go even paler. Jacob narrowed his eyes. Something was happening. Something big. Then, the judge's voice rang out, breaking the tension. We will take a brief recess. Court will resume in 30 minutes. The gavel slammed down. Jacob clenched his fists as he was led out of the courtroom, his mind spinning. He had revealed his identity, but the fight was far from over. Someone had gone through great lengths to set him up. And whoever they weren't done yet. Just a few nights ago, Jacob had been a free man, unaware of the trap being set for him. After his visit to the police station, he had gone home late that night. His apartment was neat, organized. He had always been a man of discipline. As he loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. He had handled countless cases in his career, seen all kinds of criminals, liars, manipulators, even corrupt officials. But this robbery case bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. Something wasn't adding up. Then his phone rang. He checked the caller ID. Unknown number. Jacob hesitated, then answered. Hello? A deep, distorted voice spoke. Stay out of this case, Harris. Jacob's grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you walk away. Forget the robbery case. If you don't. There was a pause, and then the voice dropped to a whisper. You won't be the one asking the questions. You'll be the one behind bars. Click. The line went dead. Jacob slowly lowered the phone. His pulse pounded. He wasn't the kind of man to be easily shaken, but this wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Someone wanted him to stop looking into the case. Someone powerful. Now, standing in the courthouse holding cell, Jacob replayed that phone call in his mind. He hadn't walked away, and now he was the one in handcuffs. The door creaked open, and a familiar face stepped in. Detective Roger Mills. The same detective who had seemed uneasy the night Jacob had visited the precinct. Mills sighed, rubbing his temples. Jacob, I don't know what's going on, but this isn't right. Jacob narrowed his eyes. Then do something about it. Mills hesitated. It's not that simple. The evidence against you, it's strong. The money was in your car. A witness swears they saw you at the scene. Jacob took a step forward. And you really believe that? Mills didn't answer right away. He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. I don't know what to believe. Jacob exhaled sharply. Listen to me. Someone set me up. This was planned. I need you to find out who's behind it. Mills hesitated, then nodded slightly. I'll see what I can do. Jacob gave a firm nod. That's all I asked. Just as Mills turned to leave, the cell door opened again. This time, it was Lisa, Jacob's assistant. Her eyes were wide, filled with urgency. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand. Jacob, she whispered. You're in danger. Jacob's stomach tightened. I think I figured that out. Lisa shook her head, her hands trembling. No, I mean, they're not just trying to frame you. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. They're trying to make sure you never leave this courthouse alive. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside the cell. And then, a loud gunshot rang out in the hallway. The sound of chaos erupted beyond the cell. Shouting, running, more gunshots. Lisa gasped, stepping back. Jacob, we have to get out of here. Mills cursed under his breath. Stay back. He moved toward the door, his hand hovering over his gun. Jacob's mind raced. This wasn't just a setup. Someone was desperate enough to try and silence him for good. Then another gunshot. This time, closer. And before anyone could react, the lights in the hallway flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the courthouse. The courthouse was plunged into darkness. The sudden loss of light sent a ripple of panic through the air. Footsteps pounded against the tiled floors, voices shouted over each other, and in the distance, another gunshot echoed. Jacob's instincts kicked in. He had been in enough high-stakes situations to know one thing. Whoever wanted him gone wasn't planning on giving him a fair trial. Lisa's breathing was fast and shaky beside him. Jacob, we have to move now. Detective Mills reached for his radio, but it crackled with static. He cursed under his breath. Somebody cut the power. They planned this. Jacob pulled against his cuffs. Then get these off me. Mills hesitated for only a second before pulling out his keys and unlocking Jacob's handcuffs. As soon as they were off, Jacob rolled his wrists, shaking off the discomfort. A voice rang out from the hallway. Secure the area. No one leaves this courthouse alive. Lisa gasped. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Jacob's mind raced. Whoever they are, they don't care about the trial. They just need me out of the picture. Mills pulled his gun and peeked out the cell door. We need a way out. Jacob moved quickly, scanning their surroundings. The service exit. It leads to the back alley. Lisa's eyes widened. But how do we get there without being seen? Before anyone could answer, heavy footsteps approached fast. A dark silhouette appeared at the end of the hallway, gun raised. Move! Mills yelled. A shot rang out, hitting the metal doorframe just inches from Lisa's head. She shrieked and ducked as Jacob grabbed her arm, pulling her behind cover. Mills fired back. Go. I'll hold them off. Jacob hesitated. Mills, go. Jacob didn't waste another second. He grabbed Lisa's hand and sprinted toward the back exit. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets ricocheting off walls. They turned a corner, rushing through the emergency exit door. The alley was empty. Rain poured from the sky, soaking them instantly. Jacob took a deep breath, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had just escaped the courthouse, but he knew this was far from over. Only a few days ago, his life had been normal. Now, he was a fugitive. He and Lisa ran through the back streets, trying to stay in the shadows. His clothes were soaked, his shoes splashing against the pavement. Every passing car, every streetlight, felt like a threat. Lisa gasped for air. Jacob, Where are we even going? He kept moving, pulling her along. Somewhere safe. We can't go home. They'll be watching. Lisa hesitated. What about Mills? Jacob's stomach twisted. He had no idea if the detective was still alive. We have to keep moving, he said. If we stop now, we're dead. They slipped into a quiet alley, stopping to catch their breath. Lisa pushed her wet hair back. Jacob, this is insane. Why would someone go this far just to take you down? Jacob's jaw clenched. Because I was getting too close. Lisa stared at him, confused. Too close to what? Jacob exhaled, his mind racing. That robbery case. It was never about some small-time criminal. That was just the bait. Someone wanted me looking in the wrong direction. Lisa's eyes widened. You think this goes deeper? Jacob nodded. And now, whoever they are, they're making sure I never find out the truth. Lisa swallowed hard. Then we have to fight back. Jacob gave her a sharp look. Lisa, this isn't some courtroom debate. These people are dangerous. They just tried to kill us. Lisa lifted her chin. And if we don't fight back, they win. Jacob studied her for a moment, then nodded. Then we do this smart. We find out who framed me, expose them, and take them down. Lisa straightened. Where do we start? Jacob took a deep breath. We find the man who was originally accused of the robbery. If someone set me up, they probably set him up too. Lisa nodded. Then let's move before they find us first. Just as they stepped out of the alley, a black SUV screeched to a stop in front of them. The back door swung open, and a man with a gun stepped out. Jacob barely had time to react before Lisa yanked him backward. The man with the gun didn't hesitate. He aimed straight at Jacob and fired. Jacob dove behind a dumpster, Lisa tumbling beside him. The bullet missed by inches. The man cursed and reloaded. We need him alive. Jacob's blood ran cold. Whoever was after him didn't just want him dead. They wanted him captured. Lisa's eyes were wide with terror. What do we do? Jacob peeked around the dumpster, his mind racing. They were boxed in. No clear exit. The man advanced, gun raised. Then Jacob spotted something. A broken metal pipe leaning against the dumpster. He grabbed it. As the man stepped closer, Jacob lunged. The pipe swung hard, smashing into the man's wrist. The gun flew from his hand, clattering onto the pavement. Jacob didn't stop. He swung again, knocking the man backward. Lisa snatched up the gun, pointing it with shaky hands. The man groaned, clutching his arm. You have no idea who you're messing with. Jacob stepped closer, gripping the pipe tightly. Then tell me. The man smirked. It won't matter. You won't live long enough to use it. Jacob's patience snapped. He grabbed the man's collar, slamming him against the wall. Who sent you? The man chuckled, even as blood dripped from his lip. You're in over your head, Harris. You were supposed to be locked away. Now, they'll just take you out for good. Jacob's grip tightened. Who? Sent. You? But before the man could answer, tires screeched. Another SUV sped toward them. Jacob's eyes widened. Run. He and Lisa sprinted down the alley, the SUV's headlights blazing behind them. And as they ran, one thought echoed in Jacob's mind. Whoever was after him wasn't just playing a game. They were going to finish this, one way or another. Jacob and Lisa ran for their lives. The roar of the SUV's engine filled the air as its tires screeched against the wet pavement. Headlights cut through the darkness, chasing them down the alley like a predator hunting its prey. Faster! Jacob yelled, grabbing Lisa's hand as they dodged overflowing trash cans and broken crates. Lisa gasped for breath. Where are we even going? Anywhere but here. Jacob shot a glance over his shoulder. The SUV wasn't slowing down. The driver had no intention of taking them alive. They burst out of the alley and onto a main street. A car honked, skidding to a stop as Jacob and Lisa dashed across the road. The SUV didn't care. It followed them, hopping the curb, tires screeching. They're not stopping, Lisa cried. Jacob's eyes darted around. Then he saw it, an old, abandoned parking garage just a block ahead. There. He pointed. They sprinted inside just as the SUV slammed on the brakes. The engine growled as the driver hesitated. Keep going up, Jacob said, leading Lisa up the winding ramps. The garage was silent except for the echo of their footsteps and the distant hum of the city outside. They reached the third level when they heard it. Footsteps. Boots stomping against the concrete. Lisa's breath hitched. They're already inside. Jacob nodded. They knew we'd come here. He scanned their surroundings. The floor was filled with abandoned cars, some covered in dust, others with shattered windows. He crouched behind a sedan and motioned for Lisa to do the same. The footsteps grew closer. Lisa gripped Jacob's arm. We can't stay here. He nodded, heart pounding. Then he saw something. A rusty fire escape on the far side of the garage. Follow me. Stay low, he whispered. They moved slowly, weaving between cars. The voices of their pursuers echoed through the garage. Fan out. He's here somewhere. Jacob clenched his fists. Whoever these people were, they weren't amateurs. Then, Lisa's foot slipped on a puddle of oil. She gasped. Jacob caught her, but it was too late. Over there, a voice shouted. Gunfire erupted. Bullets pinged off metal, shattering windows and sending sparks flying. Run! Jacob grabbed Lisa's hand, and they sprinted toward the fire escape. The men behind them fired again. The bullets barely missed as they dove behind a concrete pillar. Lisa was shaking. Jacob, we're trapped. Jacob's mind raced. He peeked around the pillar. The fire escape was just a few feet away, but the gunmen were closing in. They had one shot. On my count, run to the fire escape, Jacob whispered. Lisa nodded, her grip tightening on his arm. Jacob took a deep breath. 3, 2, 1. He grabbed a loose brick from the ground and hurled it across the garage. It clattered against a car on the other side, setting off a blaring alarm. The gunman turned toward the noise. Now! Jacob and Lisa sprinted to the fire escape. Lisa climbed first, moving as fast as she could. Jacob was right behind her, his heart hammering. Below, the gunman finally spotted them. Up there. Take them down. Gunfire erupted again. Bullets slammed into the metal staircase, shaking it violently. Lisa screamed as a bullet barely missed her shoulder. Jacob gritted his teeth. Keep going. They reached the rooftop just as the last bullet hit the railing beside them. Jacob yanked Lisa behind cover, breathing hard. The gunmen weren't far behind. Lisa turned to Jacob. What now? Jacob scanned the rooftop. There was only one option. We jump. Lisa's eyes widened. Are you crazy? Jacob pointed. It's the next building over. We can make it. Lisa stared at the gap between the two rooftops. It wasn't far, but one wrong step, and they'd fall 4 stories to the alley below. The sound of boots clanking against the fire escape made the decision for them. Jacob grabbed Lisa's hand. Trust me. She swallowed hard, then nodded. On 3, Jacob said. 1. The gunmen reached the rooftop door. 2. They raised their guns. 3. Jacob and Lisa sprinted. The gunman fired. Jacob leaped first. His body soared through the air, the wind rushing past his face. Then, his feet hit solid ground. He rolled forward, landing hard on his side. Lisa jumped next. For a second, Jacob's heart stopped. She didn't make it all the way. Her hands caught the ledge, but her feet dangled over the edge. Jacob, she screamed. Jacob lunged, grabbing her wrists. I've got you. Her fingers slipped. No. With every ounce of strength he had, Jacob pulled. Lisa scrambled, kicking her feet against the wall. Then, finally, she was up. They collapsed onto the rooftop, panting. The gunman cursed from the other building. They got away. Jacob looked at Lisa. You okay? She nodded, breathless. But Jacob's mind was spinning. They had escaped, barely. But for how long? And more importantly, who was trying this hard to kill him? They made it to a safe house by dawn. An old friend of Jacob's, Michael Carter, had once owned a small repair shop on the outskirts of the city. Now, it was nothing more than an abandoned building, but it was safe. Michael had been an investigator before he left the force, and he owed Jacob a favor. Lisa sat on the dusty counter, still shaken. I can't believe this is happening. Jacob paced. We need answers. Fast. Michael crossed his arms. I made some calls. The men after you? They're professionals, not just hired guns. These are people with connections. Jacob clenched his jaw. Then we need to hit back. Lisa hesitated. Jacob, what if it's someone inside the system? Someone high up? Michael nodded. It has to be. No random criminal could frame the chief prosecutor and get away with it. Jacob exhaled. Everything made sense now. This wasn't just about the robbery case. This was about power. Someone in the justice system, had set him up, and they were willing to kill to keep their secret safe. Jacob straightened. His eyes burned with determination. If they think I'm just going to run and hide, they're wrong, he said. Lisa stared at him. Jacob, what are you saying? Jacob clenched his fists. I'm saying it's time we take the fight to them. And that's when Michael's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face paled. He turned to Jacob. You need to see this. He handed Jacob the phone. Jacob looked at the screen, and what he saw made his blood run cold. On the news, a headline flashed across the screen. Breaking news. Fugitive Jacob Harris wanted for more than just robbery. Now accused of murder. Jacob's heart stopped. They had just made him a killer. And now, there was no going back. Jacob's grip on the phone tightened. His face darkened as he read the breaking news headline again. Jacob Harris, former chief prosecutor, accused of murder. Armed and dangerous. His own photo, one from a press conference months ago, flashed on the screen. Below it, a grainy surveillance image showed a man who vaguely resembled him, holding a gun over a lifeless body in a dark alley. Lisa gasped. Jacob, they just made you a murderer. Michael cursed under his breath. This isn't just framing anymore. They're building a story, one that ends with you either in a cell or in a body bag. Jacob clenched his jaw. Then we don't have time to waste. We need to find out who's behind this before they finish what they started. Michael nodded. I can dig into the system, see if I can find out who leaked this to the press. But you and Lisa, he hesitated. You need to disappear. Lisa frowned. Disappear? How? The whole city is looking for us now. Michael rubbed his temple. I know a guy. Ex-military. He can get you fake IDs, a place to hide. Jacob shook his head. No, we're not running. Lisa's eyes widened. Jacob, they're trying to kill you. And now you're wanted for murder. You can't just walk into the police station and fix this. Jacob turned to her. I'm not going to the police. I'm going to find the truth. Michael exhaled. And how do you plan to do that? Jacob tapped the phone screen, replaying the grainy footage. This video, where did it come from? Michael grabbed his laptop, his fingers flying over the keys. A moment later, he nodded. It was leaked to the media from an anonymous source. No name, no trace. Jacob's mind raced. Then that means whoever's behind this has someone inside the system. Someone with access to evidence. Lisa looked up. The real question is, who did they say you killed? Michael clicked again. The screen changed to another article. A mugshot appeared. Lisa gasped. It was the original robbery suspect. The man Jacob had spoken to in his holding cell just days ago. Jacob's blood ran cold. They killed him. Michael nodded grimly. And pinned it on you. Lisa's voice trembled. That means they're covering their tracks. Whoever this guy was, he knew something. Jacob gritted his teeth. And now, we don't have a witness. Which means we need another way in. Michael hesitated. There's only one person who might know who's behind this. Jacob looked up. Who? Michael exhaled. Detective Roger Mills. Lisa's eyes widened. But what if he's part of it? Michael shrugged. If he is, you're walking straight into a trap. If he's not, he's your best shot at getting inside information. Jacob thought for a moment. Mills had hesitated when arresting him. He had looked uncertain, like he knew something was off. Jacob made his decision. We find Mills. Michael nodded. I can track his last known location. He clicked a few times. There. He hasn't been to his apartment in 2 days, but his patrol car was spotted near an old warehouse outside the city. Jacob took a deep breath. Then that's where we're going. Lisa hesitated. And if it's a trap? Jacob's expression was cold. Then we fight our way out. The warehouse loomed ahead, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted shipping containers. Jacob and Lisa crouched behind an abandoned truck, scanning the area. The night was silent except for the occasional rustle of the wind. Lisa whispered, "Are we sure Mills is here?" Jacob nodded. Michael's tracker put his patrol car on the other side of this building. Lisa exhaled. "Let's hope he's still alive." They moved carefully, stepping over broken glass and debris. The warehouse door was slightly open. Jacob pushed it wider. Inside, dim light flickered from a single bulb. Wooden crates were stacked against the walls. In the center of the room, Detective Roger Mills, tied to a chair. Blood dripped from his forehead. His breathing was labored. His hands were bound behind his back. Lisa gasped, "Oh my God." Mills lifted his head weakly. His swollen eye barely opened. "Jacob?" Jacob rushed forward, untying the ropes. "Who did this to you?" Mills coughed. "The same people after you." He winced as Jacob loosened the restraints. "I tried to ask questions. I dug too deep, and they found out." Lisa helped him sit up. "Who are they?" Mills groaned in pain. "It's bigger than you think. This isn't just one corrupt cop or a rogue officer. It's an entire operation. Someone high up, someone powerful, is controlling everything. The courts, the police, even the press." Jacob's stomach tightened. "Who?" Mills opened his mouth to answer. Bang! A gunshot rang out. Mills jerked violently, then slumped forward. Blood bloomed across his chest. Lisa screamed. Jacob spun around. A figure stood in the warehouse entrance, gun still smoking. A woman, dressed in a sharp black suit. Cold eyes. A cruel smirk. Lisa's breath hitched. "Who is that?" Jacob knew. His hands curled into fists. The woman's voice was smooth, chilling. "Hello, Mr. Harris." Lisa turned to Jacob. "You know her?" Jacob's jaw tightened.
Yes.
Lisa's eyes darted between them. "Who is she?" Jacob's voice was ice. "Her name is Evelyn Carter." Lisa frowned. "And who is she?" Jacob's eyes burned with fury. "The Attorney General." Lisa's blood ran cold. The top law enforcement officer in the state. The very woman Jacob had once worked for. And now, she was standing there, gun in hand, after just murdering the only person who could clear Jacob's name. Evelyn Carter smirked. "It's over, Jacob." Jacob clenched his fists. "No, it was just getting started." Evelyn Carter took a slow step forward, her black heels clicking against the concrete floor. The warehouse smelled of rust and dust, but Jacob only smelled blood. Detective Mills lay slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow, his chest soaked in red. Lisa's hands trembled as she pressed against his wound, her face pale with horror. Evelyn tilted her head, her gun still raised. "I'd say I'm sorry about Mills," she said smoothly, "but that would be a lie." Jacob's fist clenched. "You didn't have to kill him." Evelyn smirked. "I didn't have to, but I wanted to." Lisa looked up, eyes blazing. "You're a monster." Evelyn laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's adorable. But let's not pretend you don't understand how the world works. Power isn't about what's right or wrong. It's about control. And right now," she took another step forward. "I control everything." Jacob took a slow, careful breath. She was toying with them. She thought she had already won. She didn't realize how wrong she was. "Why?" Jacob asked, stalling for time. "Why go this far just to take me down?" Evelyn sighed as if he were an unruly child. "Because you were getting in my way." "That robbery case? That was a test. We were moving money. A lot of money. Dirty money. And you? You just had to poke around, didn't you?" Jacob's mind reeled. This was all about money? Evelyn grinned. "Not just money. Power. You see, Jacob, I don't just work for the state. I work for the people who actually run it." Lisa's breath hitched. "The courts, the police. You control it all." Evelyn nodded, pleased. "See? She gets it." Jacob's voice was cold. "And the man you had murdered? The original suspect? What did he know?" Evelyn's smile faded. "He was a courier. He moved the money. But he got greedy, tried to blackmail us. So we silenced him. And when you started asking questions, we decided." She lifted the gun slightly. "Why not get rid of two problems at once?" Jacob's blood boiled. They had turned him into a fugitive, a murderer. They had killed an innocent man. They had just shot Mills. And now, Evelyn Carter stood before him, smug, confident, certain that she had won. She had no idea what was coming. Jacob moved. Fast. In one swift motion, he kicked the metal chair beside him, sending it crashing into Evelyn's legs. She staggered, her gun lowering for half a second. It was enough. Jacob lunged, grabbing her wrist. The gun fired, bang. The bullet missing by inches, slamming into a crate behind him. Lisa screamed. Jacob twisted Evelyn's wrist hard. The gun dropped. She snarled, throwing a punch. Jacob dodged, grabbed her by the collar, and slammed her into a wooden crate. Evelyn gasped, but she wasn't done. She reached for something in her coat, a knife. Jacob barely dodged the swipe. "Lisa, run," he shouted. But Lisa didn't run. She grabbed a crowbar from the ground and swung. The metal cracked against Evelyn's wrist. She screamed, dropping the knife. Jacob took the opening. He drove his knee into Evelyn's stomach, knocking the wind out of her. She collapsed to her knees, gasping. Lisa panted, gripping the crowbar. You're done." Evelyn looked up, a slow, dark grin spreading across her face. "Oh, Jacob," she whispered, her voice like poison. "You think this is over?" Jacob's gut twisted. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket. Jacob moved to stop her, but it was too late. She pressed a button on a small device. A phone rang. Lisa's eyes widened. What did you just do?" Evelyn smirked. That was my insurance policy." Jacob's stomach dropped. The warehouse door burst open. Armed officers. Tactical gear. Guns raised. Lisa froze. "Oh no." Evelyn laughed. "Congratulations, Jacob," she purred. "You just attacked the Attorney General. You're not just a fugitive now." She leaned in. "You're a terrorist." Jacob's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a frame job anymore. This was an execution. "Drop your weapons." The lead officer barked orders as the squad poured in. Red laser sights pinned Jacob and Lisa to the ground. Lisa whispered, "Jacob, what do we do?" Jacob's mind raced. Think. He glanced at Evelyn. She was already smirking, her plan unfolding perfectly. If they surrendered, they were dead. If they fought, they were dead. But there was one way out. Jacob turned to Lisa. "Trust me." She nodded. "Always." Jacob moved first. He grabbed Evelyn. In a blink, he had his arm wrapped around her throat, pulling her against his chest. The officers froze. Evelyn's smug expression vanished. "Jacob, don't." Jacob pressed the cold metal barrel of her own gun against her temple. "Lower your weapons," he said, his voice deathly calm. The officers hesitated. Lisa swallowed hard. "Jacob." Evelyn's pulse raced. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Jacob tightened his grip. "I said, drop your weapons." Silence. Then, the lead officer nodded. One by one, the guns lowered. Jacob exhaled. Now, they just had to get out alive. But Jacob knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The air in the warehouse was thick with tension. Jacob kept his grip tight around Evelyn's throat, the cold steel of the gun pressed firmly against her temple. Her body was rigid, but he could feel her pulse racing. The armed officers stood frozen, their fingers hovering over their triggers. One wrong move, one twitch, and bullets would fly. Lisa stood a few feet away, her chest rising and falling in short, panicked breaths. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of them. Jacob's voice was calm, steady, dangerous. Nobody moves. Nobody shoots. If one of you pulls the trigger, she dies first. The lead officer's jaw tightened. "Let her go, Harris. You're already in deep. Don't make this worse." Jacob let out a low chuckle. "I think you misunderstand, officer. I'm not making this worse." "She is." Evelyn let out a strained laugh. "Oh, Jacob, do you really think you can get out of this? Even if you kill me, you're already a dead man. The second you let go, they'll put a bullet between your eyes." Jacob leaned in, his lips close to her ear. "Then I won't let go." Evelyn stiffened. For the first time, she looked afraid. Lisa took a slow step toward Jacob. "Jacob, we need a way out. We can't hold this standoff forever." Jacob's mind raced. The tactical team wasn't backing down. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his grip didn't falter. Think, think, think. Then he noticed something. A security camera in the corner of the warehouse. Red light blinking. Recording. Jacob's eyes flicked to Evelyn. She hadn't thought this through. "You're broadcasting this live, aren't you?" he whispered. Evelyn's face twitched for a split second. Jacob smirked. "Gotcha." The people watching this feed, whoever they were, had to believe he was dangerous. If Evelyn's plan was to have him killed publicly, she needed him to look like a monster, a terrorist, a madman, which meant, "Lisa," Jacob said quietly, "start talking." Lisa blinked. What?" Jacob kept his gun pressed to Evelyn's temple, but turned slightly so the security camera would catch his face. "Tell them the truth. Everything." Lisa hesitated, then squared her shoulders. She faced the blinking red camera light and spoke. "My name is Lisa Carter. I'm the assistant to Jacob Harris, the man being falsely accused of robbery, murder, and now terrorism. The real criminals? They're the ones controlling the justice system. They framed Jacob because he got too close. And this woman, Evelyn Carter, the Attorney General, she's one of them." Evelyn snarled. "Shut up, girl." Lisa stepped forward, her voice stronger. "The people watching this, you've been told Jacob is a murderer, a traitor. But ask yourself, why would a guilty man take the Attorney General hostage instead of running? Why did they try to kill him instead of arresting him properly? Why did Detective Mills," her voice broke slightly, but she pushed through, "why did they kill a good man just to cover their tracks?" The lead officer glanced at his men. The doubt was spreading. Jacob pressed on. "This whole thing was set up. The video of me killing that man? Fake. The money in my car? Planted. The police chasing me down instead of letting me stand trial? Because the truth would have destroyed them." The officers shifted uneasily. Some lowered their guns slightly. Evelyn saw it too. Her control was slipping. "You're making a mistake," she hissed at the officers. "He's a fugitive. Do your job." Jacob smirked. "Looks like they're starting to think for themselves." Evelyn's nostrils flared. Her jaw clenched. Then, she made her move. Her elbow slammed backward into Jacob's ribs. Pain exploded through his chest, but he didn't let go. He fought through the sharp sting, keeping his grip locked. But Evelyn wasn't done. She stomped down on his foot, hard. Jacob's grip loosened for a split second. That was all she needed. She twisted. In a blur, she wrenched free, spinning away. The officers reacted instantly. "Get down!" Lisa screamed. Evelyn dived. Jacob's gun went off. Bang! For a second, everything froze. Then Evelyn hit the ground, clutching her shoulder. Blood seeped between her fingers. She had been shot. The officers surged forward. Lisa grabbed Jacob's arm. "Jacob, move!" But before they could run, more gunfire. Not from the officers. From outside. Bullets shattered the warehouse windows. The officers yelled, diving for cover. Lisa's eyes widened. "What's happening?" Jacob understood instantly. She had backup waiting outside. Evelyn lay on the ground, smirking through the pain. "You thought you were winning, didn't you?" she rasped. Jacob cursed. More men poured into the warehouse. Not police. Black suits. No badges. No uniforms. Lisa gasped. "Who are they?" Jacob's stomach dropped. Private security. Hired mercenaries. Loyal only to money. The new men didn't hesitate. They opened fire. Chaos erupted. The tactical team returned fire, caught in the crossfire. Some went down immediately. Others tried to push back. Jacob grabbed Lisa's wrist. "Run!" They darted toward the back of the warehouse, ducking behind crates as bullets zipped past them. Evelyn shouted orders. "Don't let them escape." Lisa panted. "Jacob, we're out of time." Jacob's mind raced. The warehouse was surrounded. No escape. Unless he spotted it. A motorcycle. Old, dusty, but functional. Lisa followed his gaze. "Oh, no. No way." Jacob ran toward it. "You got a better idea?" Bullets whizzed past. Lisa groaned. "Fine." Jacob swung onto the bike. Lisa hopped on behind him. "Hold on tight." Jacob twisted the throttle. The motorcycle roared to life. Evelyn's voice rang out. Stop them! The mercenaries charged. Too late. Jacob hit the gas. The bike lurched forward, tires screeching against the concrete. Lisa screamed as they tore through the warehouse doors, crashing through glass, bursting into the open air. The mercenaries fired after them. Bullets missed by inches. Jacob pushed the bike harder. And just like that, they were gone. But Jacob knew the truth. They weren't free. Not yet. They had one shot at exposing the truth. One chance to take down the people who framed him. And if they failed, they wouldn't live long enough to try again. The roar of the motorcycle echoed through the empty city streets as Jacob and Lisa sped into the night. The cold wind whipped against their faces, but neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They were alive, for now, but they were far from safe. Lisa clung to Jacob tightly. Where are we going? She yelled over the engine. Jacob's eyes darted to the side mirrors. Headlights appeared in the distance. Black SUVs. Evelyn's mercenaries. His grip on the handlebars tightened. Somewhere they can't follow. He twisted the throttle, pushing the bike faster. The SUVs accelerated, their engines growling like hungry beasts. Lisa turned her head. Jacob, they're gaining. Jacob gritted his teeth. He swerved onto a narrow alley, dodging trash cans and old crates. The bike bounced violently over potholes, but he held firm. Behind them, the first SUV tried to follow. Bad move. The alley was too tight. The SUV's side mirrors clipped a dumpster. Crash. Metal crunched, sparks flying as the vehicle slammed to a halt. The second SUV barely managed to avoid it. Lisa gasped. That slowed them down, but not for long. Jacob knew she was right. They needed a plan. Fast. Ahead, the alley opened back onto the main street. Jacob made a split-second decision and cut left, speeding onto a highway overpass. The city stretched before them. Neon lights flickered in the distance. Traffic was sparse, but that wouldn't last. Lisa pointed. Jacob, the bridge. His heart pounded. The highway split ahead. One road led deeper into the city. The other led onto an unfinished bridge. A dead end. Jacob knew what Lisa was thinking. He didn't like it. Lisa gripped his shoulder. We have to do it. Jacob cursed under his breath. This is insane. She tightened her hold. So is getting shot in the street. He had no choice. Jacob gunned it. The bike roared, tires screeching against the pavement as they veered toward the bridge. Behind them, the SUVs followed. The unfinished bridge loomed ahead. A gap, maybe 10 feet wide, maybe jumpable. Lisa held her breath. We're not gonna make it. Jacob didn't slow down, didn't blink, didn't breathe. They hit the edge. The world fell away beneath them. For a second, just a second, they were airborne. Lisa screamed. Jacob's chest tightened. The other side rushed toward them. The bike slammed down hard. Jacob fought to keep control as the wheels skidded. Sparks flew. Lisa gripped his waist so tight he could barely breathe. Then, they stopped. Silence. Jacob exhaled shakily. That was... Lisa punched his arm. Never do that again. He let out a short, breathless laugh. Noted. Behind them, the SUVs skidded to a stop. Jacob turned to see Evelyn's mercenaries standing at the edge of the bridge, furious. They couldn't follow. Not without dying. Jacob smirked. That buys us time. Lisa groaned, still catching her breath. Yeah, but for how long? 1 hour later. The bike rumbled to a stop outside a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place where people didn't ask questions. Jacob climbed off first, stretching his sore arms. Lisa staggered off behind him, still shaken. That was the worst thing I've ever done, she muttered. Jacob gave her a look. Worse than almost getting shot? Lisa hesitated. Okay, second worst. They headed toward the entrance. The neon sign flickered. Vacancy. Inside, the motel was dimly lit, the smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the air. A sleepy old man sat behind the counter, barely looking up as Jacob slid some cash across the desk. One room, Jacob said. The man grunted, tossing him a key. End of the hall. Jacob nodded and took it. He and Lisa moved quickly, shutting the door behind them. Finally, a moment of quiet. Lisa collapsed onto the bed, rubbing her face. Jacob, what's our next move? Jacob sat at the small table, staring at his hands. We need evidence, he said. Lisa frowned. Didn't we just tell the truth on that security feed? Wasn't that enough? Jacob shook his head. Evelyn can spin that however she wants. But hard evidence? That's something she can't erase. Lisa sat up. And where do we find that? Jacob's jaw tightened. We go back to where it started. Lisa's eyes widened. The precinct? He nodded. They planted evidence against me. That means they have files, records, surveillance footage. Something that proves it was a setup. Lisa exhaled. Breaking into a police station while being the most wanted man in the state? No big deal. Jacob's lips quirked. You getting scared on me? Lisa glared. I got shot at, chased, and jumped off a bridge tonight. I think I'm past scared. Jacob's smirk faded. Good. Because this is our only shot. Lisa sighed. Then let's get some rest. We'll need it. Jacob nodded. But even as Lisa curled up on the bed, exhaustion taking over, Jacob didn't sleep. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew. Tomorrow, they either clear his name, or they die trying. And if Evelyn Carter thought she had already won, she was about to learn the hard way. Jacob Harris wasn't going down without a fight. Jacob sat in the dimly lit motel room, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a battlefield, thoughts colliding, plans forming and breaking apart. Every second counted. Lisa was curled up on the bed, her breathing slow and steady. She had finally drifted off to sleep, exhaustion overtaking her. Jacob envied her. He hadn't slept in days. Tomorrow, they were breaking into the police precinct, a place filled with officers who believed he was a killer, a place controlled by the same corrupt system trying to bury him alive. If they were caught, it was over. But if they succeeded, they could burn Evelyn Carter's empire to the ground. 6 a.m. the next morning, Lisa groaned as Jacob nudged her shoulder. Wake up. We don't have time to waste. She rubbed her eyes. We really have to do this, huh? Jacob tossed her a protein bar. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life running. Lisa sighed. Fine. But I just want to say, for the record, this is insane. Jacob smirked. Noted. She sat up. So what's the plan? Jacob unfolded a rough blueprint of the police precinct, a worn-out emergency exit layout he had stolen years ago while working on a corruption case. He pointed to a side entrance. This is our way in. It leads to the evidence room, where they're keeping the fabricated files against me. Lisa frowned. And what if there are guards? Jacob's eyes darkened. There will be. Lisa exhaled. Great. So it's basically a suicide mission. Jacob shrugged. Pretty much. Lisa groaned. Perfect. Let's go. 8 a.m., outside the police precinct. The morning air was crisp. The city was waking up, but Jacob and Lisa weren't interested in the normal morning rush. They were watching the police station. Jacob adjusted his hoodie, keeping his face low. Across the street, uniformed officers walked in and out of the building, chatting over coffee. To them, it was just another day. They had no idea what was coming. Lisa nudged Jacob. You see any gaps? Jacob's eyes scanned the area. Then, he spotted it. A garbage truck pulled into the side alley, preparing for its usual pickup routine. The perfect distraction. Jacob grabbed Lisa's wrist. Now. They moved fast. Low, quiet, invisible. By the time the garbage truck revved its engine, they were already slipping into the side entrance. Inside, the hallway was empty. For now, Lisa let out a slow breath. Okay, we're in. Now what? Jacob pulled out a stolen keycard. Now we move. The evidence room. Jacob and Lisa crouched behind a row of filing cabinets. The evidence room was huge, filled with shelves, storage lockers, and security cameras mounted in every corner. 2 armed officers stood guard, chatting quietly. Lisa whispered, How do we get past them? Jacob's eyes flicked to a fire alarm switch on the far wall. He smirked. Stay low. When the alarm goes off, they'll leave. Lisa's eyebrows shot up. You're going to set off a fire alarm inside a police station? Jacob grinned. You wanted a plan. Lisa rolled her eyes. Fine. But if this goes wrong, I'm haunting you. Jacob smirked. moving toward the alarm switch. He grabbed a pocket knife from his sleeve. Flick. The blade sliced through the alarm panel wires. Beep, beep, beep. The alarms screamed through the station. The officers snapped to attention. What the hell? The intercom crackled. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. The two officers rushed out. Jacob and Lisa moved. They navigated through the shelves, scanning labels. Jacob's hands shook. This was it. The moment they had risked everything for. Lisa whispered urgently, "Where is it?" Jacob's eyes darted. Then, there. A folder labeled Case File #H231. Jacob Harris, Evidence. He grabbed it and flipped it open. Lisa's breath caught. Oh my God. Inside. Photographs. Surveillance footage. Witness testimonies. All doctored. Lisa pointed. Jacob looked. At the bottom of the file, a signature. Evelyn Carter. Jacob's grip on the file tightened. She signed off on all of it, Lisa whispered. This is the proof we need. Jacob nodded. We need to get out of here now. Lisa pulled out her phone. We send this to the press, the government, everyone. Then, the intercom crackled. Attention all officers. Jacob Harris is inside the building. Lock it down. Lisa's face drained of color. Jacob cursed. They knew. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Lisa panicked. Jacob, we're trapped. Jacob's mind raced. They needed an exit. Fast. He spotted a window. 3rd floor. Not ideal, but better than a bullet to the head. Come on. He grabbed Lisa's hand, yanking her toward the window. She gasped. Are you insane? Jacob threw a chair through the glass. Crash. The sound echoed through the station. Lisa's hands shook. We are so dead. Jacob grabbed her waist. No, we're not. Then, they jumped. Impact. They hit the rooftop of a police van below. The metal dinted beneath them. Pain shot through Jacob's ribs, but he forced himself up. Lisa groaned. Ow. I hate you. Jacob grinned. Noted. Then, a police siren blared. More officers flooded the parking lot. Lisa's eyes widened. Jacob, run. They bolted. Bullets whizzed past. They dodged between parked cars, hearts pounding. Then, a black SUV screeched into view. Lisa skidded to a stop. Oh, come on. The passenger window rolled down. And there, smiling calmly, was Evelyn Carter. She tilted her head, gun in hand. You really thought you could win, she purred. Jacob's fist clenched. Evelyn Carter had every advantage. But what she didn't know was that Jacob had just sent the evidence to every major news outlet in the country. His phone buzzed. Message sent. Jacob smirked. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. What are you smiling at? Jacob took a slow breath. Check the news. Evelyn's face dropped. And for the first time, she wasn't in control. Evelyn's smirk vanished. The confident gleam in her eyes turned into cold realization. She slowly pulled out her phone with her free hand, keeping the gun leveled at Jacob. The SUV idled. Officers closing in behind them, sirens blaring. Jacob and Lisa stood frozen, but Jacob knew he had already won. Lisa whispered, Tell me you really sent it. Jacob didn't take his eyes off Evelyn. I really sent it. Evelyn's fingers flew across her phone screen, and then, her face drained of color. Lisa's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, gasping. It's everywhere. Jacob's smirk widened. You feel that, Evelyn? That's the world watching. That's your empire crumbling. Evelyn's eyes burned with rage. She turned the screen toward Jacob. It was a live news broadcast. Breaking news. Attorney General Evelyn Carter exposed in high-level corruption scandal. Images flashed. The forged evidence. The false accusations. The connection to the robbery. The murder of the original suspect. Jacob watched as the newscaster read aloud. Sources confirmed that leaked documents from inside the justice system prove that Jacob Harris was framed by high-ranking officials, including Attorney General Evelyn Carter herself. The police officers surrounding them were listening. Evelyn noticed. Their guns wavered. Doubt crept into their faces. Jacob's voice was low and lethal. You lost. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the trigger. No, I didn't. She fired. Bang. Lisa screamed. Jacob dived left. The bullet tore through the space where his head had been a second ago. Chaos erupted. The surrounding officers snapped into action. "Drop your weapon." Evelyn ignored them. She swung the gun toward Lisa. Jacob lunged. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard. The gun clattered to the pavement. Evelyn snarled, swinging wildly, but Jacob blocked the attack, twisting her arm behind her back. "Get off me," she shrieked. Jacob's grip tightened. He leaned in. His voice was ice. "This is what justice feels like." The officers rushed in. They grabbed Evelyn, forcing her to the ground. Handcuffs snapped around her wrists. One officer, a captain, looked at Jacob. "You got proof?" Jacob nodded. "It's all in the files I sent. Check your inbox." The captain glanced at his phone. His eyes widened. Then, he looked at Evelyn. His lips curled in disgust. "You're under arrest," he said coldly. Evelyn struggled. "You idiots. I own you. You can't do this." Lisa crossed her arms. "Yeah, you keep telling yourself that." Evelyn's eyes blazed with fury. "You think this is over? You think I'm the only one? This system is rotted to the core. You can't stop it." Jacob crouched beside her. "Maybe not, but we stopped you." She spat at the ground. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Harris. Because you're not a hero. You're just a man who got lucky." Jacob's expression didn't change. "And you're just a woman who got caught." The officers dragged her away. For the first time, Evelyn Carter had no control, and it destroyed her. 1 week later, the world had changed overnight. Evelyn Carter's arrest had shaken the entire justice system. The corruption in the Attorney General's office was national news. More names came out: judges, officers, politicians, all connected to the web of power she had built. And Jacob? He had gone from fugitive to hero. He sat in a high-rise office, watching the city through the window. Lisa stood beside him, arms crossed. "You really think they'll fix everything?" Jacob exhaled. "No, but at least now people see the truth." Lisa smirked. "So what now? Do you go back to being the prosecutor?" Jacob shook his head. "No. The system I worked for, it was broken. I can't just walk back in and pretend it's fixed." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "So you're just going to disappear?" Jacob smiled. "Not disappear. Rebuild." Lisa tilted her head. "Rebuild what?" Jacob's gaze was firm. "A justice system that actually serves the people." Lisa chuckled. "That's a big job." Jacob smirked. "Good thing I don't scare easy." She laughed, shaking her head. "Well, whatever you do, don't get framed for murder again. I don't think my heart can take it." Jacob grinned. "Deal." As the city buzzed below them, one thing was certain. Jacob Harris wasn't running anymore. He wasn't a fugitive. He wasn't a pawn in someone else's game. He was free. And for the first time in a long time, justice had actually won.